last weekend, a very important weekend, we had garage sales out. And all my thrifty brethren descended upon the streets. And I'm out there. I love a good deal. And so I'm just in my natural habitat. I'm haggling, I'm getting stuff I don't need just to see how low I can get it, I walk home with just a van full of junk. And so it's great. I've always been that way. I like a deal. I like to find a good deal. One of the better ones I've ever found was the Yukon that I drive. I got it. I actually flew to go get it off of Craigslist. So there's a whole story. There's a bad lot of not great wisdom in there. But it worked out, all right? It worked out for me. I get this Yukon, super low miles, but everything else is busted on it. And it's the one I still drive. And one of the things about it, when I got it, I realized there's this, right above my speedometer, there's a black piece of electrical tape. Now, I'm not sure how good of a mechanic you are, but that little piece of electrical tape can solve a whole lot of problems really quickly. Now, instead of seeing this indicator light blinking at you all the time, telling you that, no, you are most likely going to die in a car fire, it's just gone. Just like that. Problem solved. And so this guy that I bought it from, ironically, was a mechanic. He would look at this situation and he said, you know what? The biggest problem in this situation is the light. So all he needed to do was cover the light. Now, we know that that's not true, though, is it? That the real problem is not the light. The real problem is what the light is trying to tell us. That there's a problem behind the light. That there's a cause for the light. Throughout our own lives, there are all sorts of indicators that flash up. They come from relationships. They come from internal things. They come from the struggles. They come from the feelings that float up in us. And we feel a certain way and we go, I'm not sure if this is right. But what we do is we get really handy with electrical tape. And we start covering things. And because we believe the same thing that guy believed, that if I could make the light stop, then I would be better. If I can make this feeling go away, then I'd be okay. Right? So what happens is we get that feeling, and you've had this, because I know you're not as fancy as you think you are, all right? You're driving, and something goes wrong with your vehicle, and the light starts, and the dinging, right? And in that moment, you have this feeling of dread. And you say, if I could stop that feeling, if I can stop these feelings, then I'd be okay. What we're doing is we say that feeling means failure. But it's not. That feeling is just, it's a diagnosis. It's an attempt. It's saying, no, there's something here to look at deeper. You need to look deeper at this. Don't just cover it up. This last number of weeks, we've worked through Ecclesiastes, and we've kind of looked at a lot of these different indicators, a lot of these different lights that shine up in people's lives and say, there's a problem here, look closer. And we've looked at all these different types of electrical tape that people use to cover up these lights. Looked at all these different philosophies or these things that they've tried, but really they all come down to the same question, if you will, that same indicator light that keeps flashing. And it's this question, how do I achieve my purpose in life? How do I achieve my purpose in life? And so we've sampled different colors and types of electrical tape throughout this whole book. Where he says, well, what about this one? And we put it over there, and the conclusion to that is that, no, everything still breaks down and your life is meaningless. Okay, well, what if we tried that one? Nope. The conclusion is it still doesn't work. And we tried partnering some together, and he's looked at different people bringing different answers or different philosophies, and they all end with the same conclusion. So he's used this sort of pattern throughout the whole book where he observes that these things are wrong and there are problems in life. And so let's test these different philosophies or these different types of tape to cover up and get around it. And the conclusion to each of them is, no, you still have not achieved your purpose and your life is still meaningless. And we've seen it again and again and again. So this final section of Ecclesiastes, which is where we're going to be today, chapter 12, verses 8 through 14, it's monumentally important to the book. Monumentally important. And what's really fascinating, just to give you a little bit of kind of textual background on this, we're actually hearing from a different voice. We heard from them in the very beginning, but here we are at the very end. And it's sort of like, even though this whole time we've heard from the teacher or the preacher, it's kind of like someone's been reading this to us, as if they have been the person who's been listening and gathering everything from the preacher, teacher, compiling it, organizing it for him. It's kind of like the scribe. And then this is what happens. We finished chapter 11 or into chapter 12 there. And it's kind of like the book closes. And then you have this person who's been with him the whole time summarizing. He's going to tell you, so do you know what he says? Do you know what the preacher's getting at? We close the book after we've just read it all together. And you know what? My reflection, my summary of everything he just said, the really heart of the answer of the preacher is this in verse 8. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. Everything, so that's it. That's it. After reading the whole book, if you're going to boil it all down, he says, I look into the world and I've seen all the hypotheses and I've seen all the philosophies and I've seen all the clever answers and I've also seen all the get-arounds, and every piece of electrical tape really just brings us to the same thing. Nothing. We leave empty-handed. When we go and we approach the world and we say, world, give me your best. Answer me these questions. It just hands us a bucket of mist. And we can't do anything with it. We can't latch onto it. We can't believe in it. We can't sink our teeth into it. It's just gone. It doesn't last. This is his summary. The preacher's conclusion. We leave empty-handed, meaningless. Now, the commentator here is going to give us a fair assessment. We just read this book. The kind of message of the book is, hey, everything out there is meaningless. There isn't hope in all the answers that we tried to float. And we floated a lot. We looked at the cynic, who can kind of look down at life because they've got it all together. We looked at the hedonist, who's going to sort of just pleasure their way through everything. We've looked at the isolationist. We've looked at the opportunist, who's just going to stack enough dubs that, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to create enough meaning in my life and achieve enough meaning in my life and achieve enough purpose in my life by being successful. And we looked at a number of these. I could keep going, but he walks down the line. He says, all of this is meaningless. And the reflection of his work is what comes next. Verse 9 says, not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads. Their collected sayings are like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. So this is the reflection. Again, remember, close the book. And the summary was, man, everything out there is meaningless. And then we have this moment of reflection to say, but you know what I appreciate about that book is he did such a good job. He went back and he was fair. He taught it. He researched it. He double-checked it. He was thorough in the way he collected these things and ordered them. It made sense because he knew what he was doing. And so while his conclusion is sad and even upsetting, it's fair. It's fair. He looked at all these answers that the world gives, and they're empty, and that's fair because he did a good job compiling them. He uses this very poetic title. He calls it Goads and Nails. And I find that very interesting. There's some deep meaning here. We don't have time to get into too much of it, but the general premise is like a goad. You know what a goad is? It's like you poke things to get them moving, right? It's just a sharp stick. And you'd goad your livestock to keep going. Go on, get. Right? And you'd poke. It's like an Amish hot stick, okay? Right? Like, so you can laugh at that. They don't listen to my live stream. It's fine. They're not, it's fine. So you'd poke them. The premise of this is that the wisdom moves you where it should. But the opposite is also true. He says they're like nails. I don't think I need to explain to you what nails are, right? They're sharp, pointy little metal. They hold things together, okay? Right? That's what nails do. So goads force things to move, and nails force things to stay. And the concept is just like the goads, nails, is that this wisdom, it moves you where you should, and it forces you to stay where it should. He has done a good job of compiling, these are the boundary lines. This is the way the world works. This is truth that we see lived out in front of us. Goads and nails. And what's fascinating, what he says there, given by one shepherd. Now there's a reference here to God as the shepherd. You can sort of read that into there. But what I think is really fascinating is that goad isn't particularly what the shepherd would use. And nails not as much either. So you have this dissonant imagery where he's saying it's like goads, it's like nails, but yet the heart is one from a shepherd who would guide and would care, who would nurture, who would direct. There's actually a rich kindness and compassion in the way that he put this together. He's forcing you to look at the conclusions because you can't go that way. And he's forcing you to look at these conclusions because you just have to go this way. Why? Because there's a heart of a shepherd that would provide you these things. Now, I can't really overstate this. The next two verses, 13 and 14, are so important to this book. So inextricably, so monumentally important to understanding the entire book. It's the summary and application of the entire book of Ecclesiastes is going to end these two verses. And you can tell that by the start of verse 13 where he says, "And now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter." This is a big statement. All has been heard. All of it has been heard. All of it can work together. Everything that you think you know, everything that you would like to be true, everything about your fears and your doubts, they're represented in the book. Just think about that. Your fear of dying. He talks about what it's like to live a life that's afraid of death. Your fear of being insignificant. He talks about what is it like to try to live a life where you're creating your own significance. Your fear of being alone. Your fear of being forgotten. Your doubts of who God is or his kindness. Your doubts of if God even existed. You can read this and there's an atheistic argument in Ecclesiastes which says there's nothing after this. He walks through these things. All of our fears, all of our doubts, they're heard, they're represented in this book, which is a pretty big statement. But I think it's fair. All of this has been heard. All of it is answered. While they take different roads to get here, all of them, our fears, our doubts, our broken philosophies, end up needing this answer. It's in the middle of, starts in 13. He says, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." That's it. That's the end. That's how the book ends, and it's really this big mic drop moment. It's this really heavy, intentional, intense moment where if you're not even familiar with this language, it might not even feel all that of a happy ending. So the big grand finale here is fear God and keep his commandments. And you go, I don't really like that. I was hoping more for something inspirational. But what happens is not just an emptiness of like, go do these things. If you were to dig into these phrases and you're like really understand what's happening here, fearing God, keeping his commandments is really pointing us to the gospel. Fearing God and keeping his commandments is a way that we're being invited into the gospel to truly understand the basis for the gospel. I would say it this way. The story of Jesus connects fearing God and loving Jesus so that the life we live is one that keeps his commands. And in that we experience the joy. We walk in the promises. We have the peace. When we get close to God, listen, so fear of God, we don't really use that terminology much, but it's rich. It means a lot. When we experience some of God, even just the smallest bit, what we're doing is we're recognizing what he's showing of himself. So this might be, even if you're not a Christian, right? You might be thinking out in nature at one point, you're like, man, that is a beautiful sunset. Look at this canyon. And there's just this flash of a thought, just a moment where you're like, man, somebody had to make this. Like this had to come from somewhere. There's this little moment where you realize, oh, I think there had to be someone. There has to be a maker. There has to be some sort of creator. There has to be someone who has their hands in this. And really quickly following that thought is the thought, that person is different than this person. Right? And what we're wrestling with is really this base understanding that as human as we are, and the people we interact with and the things we know in life are just this humanity, God is different. That's fair, right? Like we live in a world that is underneath someone else's authority. It might be time. You're not going to get away from that one. It might be just power, just stronger things than you. Have you ever been in a storm, like a bad storm? Boy, that'll make you feel small quick. When there's this massive amount of force and energy that doesn't care about you at all. And will kill you in a moment's notice. Like that sort of power that you go, I'm very little. I'm underneath that authority. Like I'm underneath that power. I can't get above that. I can't control that. And then you begin to realize this is just sort of the logical thought. There has to be a maker. He has to be different than me. He has to be a lot bigger than me. In fact, that creator, that otherness of God is that he does not submit. There's no one over him. He doesn't answer to time. He doesn't answer to the storm. He doesn't answer to the fear. You ever had someone you love get very ill? The helplessness that comes over you, where you realize I am completely, and they are completely underneath someone else's guide. I can't do anything. I can't be stronger than this. I can't be bigger than this. What we wrestle with is not just the fact that we are a being and God is an other being, but we begin to realize the dissonance between how big he is, how powerful he is, how great he is. And in that dissonance, the greater those things are apart, that's where we find the fear of God. Where you go, that's incredible. Now follow this thought, right? So we talked about power. That's just like one little sliver, really, of all the things we could talk about. Think about his holiness. In this fear of God, where you're recognizing, this is who I am, and I am very small. And I recognize the creator who is so big. And then I see just a glimpse when I just think about his perfection, his holiness. So what is it that would move a holy creator into wrath? Well, it probably would be a wicked created being. That we aren't just distant in size or in power, but we are distant in holiness. Like the purity of him and the brokenness of me. And in that separation, that the fear of God grows. You begin to see he's not just big. He's not just powerful. Like, he's dangerous. He is huge. He is immense. And there's a weight, what some theologians have called the weight of glory. There's like a heaviness. And you realize, like, man, I can't come up against him. I can't look at him the way I look at you. God is bigger. God is greater. God is grander. God is more holy. So here's what happens. The moment you realize the holiness factor trickles down into a wrath, which trickles down into not just a fear of God, but a holy terror. Because now this is an immense being, beyond my comprehension, and I'm his enemy. This is where the good news of Jesus is so good. That Jesus, in his kindness, that he comes. In fact, the Father sends him so that the wrath that should come from this immense other being, that it should come and fall on us, is diverted to his Son. And God would use this dangerous power to care for me. That God would use his immense otherness, that he would use his weight to love me, to care for me, to provide a way out for me. And so here's what happens. That fear of God translates to this loving of Jesus. That really, because I fear God so much and I recognize how great he is and how far I've fallen, it creates that much more appreciation and recognition of who Jesus is, of how much God would need to love me to rescue me from his own wrath, from the punishment I deserve. That God would step into that. And all of a sudden, the fear of God is not this distant, cold, holy terror. No, the fear of God is a recognition of how powerful his love is for me. It's greater than I could comprehend to begin with. And now it's not against me, it's for me. It's coming behind me, it's coming up underneath me, it's lifting me, it's changing me. That the love of God is present. Paul writes about this in a slightly different way, but I'm going to use this same language here. He goes from in Ephesians 2. He says, "For it is by grace you have been saved." It's this kindness of God through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God. That's the other aspect, that you couldn't do this if you wanted. It's not by works. You didn't achieve this. It's actually so that no one can boast. That the fear of God, how distant he is from the way we think about ourselves, should be pushed further and further every day. That there's more and more distance. Because his grace proves this to us every time we think about it. Every time we think about it. The preacher says that we need to consider how the fear of God and keeping his commandments, living this out, fulfills our purpose. There's a verse here, verse 13, I believe it is, where he says that the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. Now, I just want to get this out there, right? We got to work through this. Some of y'all would think that I would use this opportunity to make a duty joke. And I would not sully myself, all right? I think that kind of humor stinks. And I think some of y'all need to mature a bit, okay, when we're talking about these things, because if we're going to if we're going to work together, right, I would not bring my bloodline down to that kind of humor. So I just want to walk through that real quick. The whole duty of man. You know what's interesting? That translation, I do bring that up on purpose, is most of our translations use duty there because it's this idea of like action, like purpose, prerogative, like what you're going to be doing. You are here in this world, and you have sort of a responsibility levied on you. And all of this is an existence that's given. But the literal translation is, this is the all of man. I think there's something really powerful about that it's not just kind of your job, and if you don't do this, you'll miss out on your job. He's saying that to fear God, to keep his commandments, to walk in that, is your whole existence here. This is the reason God has made any of us, is that in the world, he says, I'm going to put you here so that you look ahead and you see, I am here for him. I'm going to plan my future that way. That there's other things that are going to pull me away. I'm going to say no because I know who God is and I know who I am. And that dissonance creates this fear in me, this recognition of the danger. And in that danger, I go, God is so good to me to send me Jesus. And so I'm going to keep these commands. I'm going to walk with him. Why would I leave him? This is why I'm here. This is my all. And in fact, Paul, in these verses, pushes us right to that thought. In verse 10, he says, for we are God's handiwork, meaning we were made Why? Created in Christ Jesus to do these good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. This has been the plan, that God will rescue you, God will save you, God will bring you close, and God will give you the purpose himself. The purpose is here. The purpose is here. God saves us into a life of purpose. Listen, we have been asking this question, how do I achieve purpose in my life? We've asked this again and again, but we've gotten bad answers every time we've asked it. And the reason for that is this is a bad question. This is a bad question because you can't achieve your purpose. You can't achieve. Purpose isn't an achievement, it's a gift. In fact, the whole gospel message is that you couldn't do this. You couldn't save yourself. You couldn't bring this out of your own life. Whatever you do can't earn you a purpose here. God gives this to us. That it's a joy. That it's a kindness. It's a grace that he says, I see you. You're intentionally designed to live in this time and space with your family. I purposely placed you here. I purposely gifted you. I purposely put things around you in a certain way so that when you walk with me, you will discover this purpose. It's not an achievement that you earned. It's a gift that we discover greater and greater pieces of, greater and greater moments, deeper and deeper joy in. I wonder if some of us, that honestly is the only thing God really wants to get through to you today. That you have fallen into this again and again, thinking you can earn purpose, you can earn meaning, you can create that for yourself, and you just can't. That in Christ, you're given love, you're given acceptance, you're given belonging, but it was never achieved by you. And the longer you think that, the further you're going to fall. Now, every other philosophy teaches that you have to achieve it. Just let me be clear on this, okay? Every other philosophy will teach you, you need to achieve this, and maybe it puts a number next to it. Maybe it puts a title next to it. Maybe it puts someone's specific approval next to it. And it says, well, if you reach this, then you will be complete, and then you will have meaning in your life, and then you will have purpose. But that's not the gospel. That's not the gospel. The gospel has never stopped so short. Honestly, it's tempting to sort of end the sermon here. I'm not. Don't worry. But it's tempting to end on that sort of like, look, go live with purpose. But the reality is, even if we do end with that, there's sort of this how. How do I do that? How do I walk in real time? Because when the lights are flashing in my own life, those indicators going off, and it's these thoughts that keep coming, or it's this pain that won't stop, or it's this dead end again, or it's this I don't know how many days I can do this. How in those times is there purpose? How is the gospel true then? When I recognize that I'm glad I can't achieve it because that's not going well for me, and I just want to just kind of give up anyway. What does it look like to follow the gospel purpose, to follow the hope that he's placed in front of us while we're in the trench? Now, the Apostle Paul wrote this letter, and he wrote it to the church that was in the city of Rome. And they're having some issues, and so he writes this letter, and it unfolds, and it just sort of deeply explains the gospel. He explains the gospel, and after a section that specifically deals with God showing mercy to people in their salvation. Right after saying that, he gives us this answer. And I think it answers this question of how do we actually live this out? This is what he says in Romans 12, verse 1. It says, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Here's the base theological truth you have to grab here, is that believing in Jesus changes you. Do we believe that? Yeah, that believing in Jesus actually changes who we are. And what that does is he says, okay, look at me with this. When he says, in view of God's mercy, What he's doing there is referencing what we talked about with the fear of God. That I look back and I realize how grand God is and how much I don't deserve, and I realize how holy he is and how much punishment I do deserve, and I recognize that God skipped over that gap, that he rescued me. I recognize that God in his mercy diverted all of that wrath to his son so that I could be with him, that I could be adopted. And so he says, keep that in the front of your mind. Mercy in the front of your mind. What you actually deserve in the front of your mind. In view of that, this is how I want you to live. I want you to push forward. I want you to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, what does that mean? Well, what would you do with a sacrifice in the Old Testament? You take the animal, and you bring it, and you kill it, you put it on the altar, and you burn it up. The entirety of this animal's life and the entirety of its existence is consumed in the worship of that God. That's what a sacrifice does. It takes every ounce and every moment and every bit of worth, and it consumes it for the sake of that God. And what he's saying is, I don't want you to go hop on an altar. What I want you to realize is that the life God has given you is your altar. And what you need to do is live in a way in your own physical body, in real time, that takes every part of your life and makes it consumed with following Jesus. Now you take the opportunities he gives you and the giftings he gives you and the resource he gives you and the hopes and the dreams that he's given you, and you say, all of these things I'm going to point toward Jesus. All of these things I'm going to use to chase Jesus. And he says that's what it looks like to follow. That's what it looks like to live this pure worship. That's what it means to worship God, to walk this out in real time as a real person. You say, okay, I want to do that, right? This seems like a good idea. I don't really know how. Again, with this how, again with like following Jesus in real life. How do I do that? Well, that's where I'm really thankful for verse 2. Verse 2 is like a double click on verse 1. Right? Double click. Okay, so for the Gen Zers over here, double click. Computers, they used to have a thing called mice. And then I don't know why they were called that, but you would click, right? Like, right? You'd actually click something. And then to get more information on something, you'd like double click. Right? Does that make sense? It's kind of like on your iPhone, like you hold your thumb on something and like previews. You know what I'm talking about? I got it. I'm pretty hip and cool. Okay, so verse 2 is this double click. It's this deeper explanation. He's going to take this, and when we say, I want to live that way, I want to be on this like fire for Jesus, walking around. How do I do that? It says it like this. Verse 2. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let's just take that bit right there where he says, do not be conformed. That's the how. He's saying, look, you want to walk with Jesus? Then don't look like the people who aren't walking with Jesus. All the broken philosophies, don't do that. All the broken ways of living, don't do that. All that bad wisdom we've talked about, don't do that. Don't look that way. If you conform yourself to that pattern, guess what will happen? You will become a pattern of the world. And the whole point of what he's rescuing you to is that you don't become a pattern of this broken world. And listen, this is a thing. Like, Christians do this. Christians, good Christian people who say with their mouths that they want to follow Jesus, but then they conform themselves to what the patterns of the world say will work. They conform their lives. They conform their money. They conform their pastimes. They conform their hopes and their dreams. They pattern their marriage off of what they see. And then they end up in a place and they go, why do I feel meaningless? Why do I feel like the rug's been pulled out? Why do I feel like there's no purpose? It's because we've done the exact thing that he said not to do. They wonder, why am I not transformed? He says, do not be conformed, but instead be transformed. That's easy to say, just like be transformed. But again, with the double click, what does that mean? Well, this is how you become transformed, by the renewing of your mind. The renewing of your mind. As we walk with Jesus, he renews us. the way we think, the way we see, what we know. He changes us. And so we may be in a very similar situation as we were a couple years ago, where that's fine because we're different people now. Because as I've had one foot in this world that I live with you, I've had another foot in heaven with Jesus. And my time with Jesus is changing me so that I'm a different person here. And I see you differently now. And I see myself differently now. And I see our opportunities differently now. That Jesus has changed who I am by renewing my mind. Now, I didn't achieve that. He gifted it to me. It was a grace that he has changed me. And as I live this out, what happens? I discover my purpose. That God's changed me so I can see and I can know and I have the power and I have the moment to live in the purpose that he's given me. It's right here. But I won't see it if I'm not renewed. And I won't be renewed in my mind if I'm conforming myself to the pattern of the world. I'll miss it. And this is where it takes us. If you're able to do this, to walk with Jesus, as you go, this is what happens. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. His good, pleasing, perfect will. That, here's the thing. You get to live it. That's the invitation. It's not just like, we'll do this thing and then up in heaven, somebody's going to do your paperwork. It'll be better for you at the end. He's saying, no, you feel that indicator light of purposelessness, and he's inviting you to deal with the problem. That I'm going to renew your mind. I'm going to fix what's going on. I'm going to heal. I'm going to change you. Anybody use a little healing? Yeah? Anybody use a little change? We need that. He's inviting us into that because as we walk in that, he says, then you get to see it. You get to test it. You get to know it's real in real time. You get to approve what God's will is. Meaning, not that he's waiting for your check, but that you get to validate. You like, you know what? This is as good as he said it would be. I validate that God has brought me this purpose, this will for my life. But there's that. If you look at that verse, middle of verse 2, you see that word then, right? This comes after, meaning we walk with him. We don't conform ourselves. We get our mind renewed with him, and then we walk in this. Then we live this out. It's like we get to fear God. We get to obey his commands. There's this love of Jesus, and it infuses purpose in what we do. That's the end result, is I get to experience this in a moment with God in real time. Purpose is not an achievement. It's a gift. But here's the real challenge for you that comes off of this. You need to let God prove it. That God has this will, but he will allow you to miss it. I don't know if you've ever heard anything scarier in your life. That you will miss blessing, that you will miss what he has for you because you decide to stay in disobedience. That there's movement forward, there's purpose on the other end of this, that he's inviting us by being renewed to walk in this. But many Christians say no. That we wallow in weakness, that we don't test our faith, we don't step out into the obedience that we know he's called us to, and then we complain. And we complain we aren't healed, and we complain we aren't victorious, and we complain we aren't living with this power. We complain we don't see in Scripture what we see in our lives, and we complain because we're walking in disobedience. But he says, do not conform, be renewed, and know what I have for you. But we have to let God prove this, that God wants to transform us. He wants to transform our lives. We want to see big growth. In our own lives, we want to see that for our kids, for our communities. We want to see this. We want to see transformations. Yet we neglect what's in front of us. And we neglect our spouse. And we're selfish with our time. And we're stingy with our money. And we're greedy with our opportunities. It's like we say we want it, but we don't. We would rather love our sin and sit in disobedience than see what God has for us on the other side of obedience. That the blessing, that the invitation for there. And I can tell, I know some of y'all, it's like it stings a little, doesn't it? Because we see ourselves in there. Imagine what's on the other side of that. Imagine what he has for us. Listen, God is eager to prove his power in our lives. Do you believe that? That God is eager to prove, to unfold in our lives power that we need to see. Power to change a marriage. He is eager to prove that. Power to see someone move from a lost person to an adopted son or daughter right before your eyes. God is eager to prove that. God is eager to unfold a spiritual movement right here in our communities. He's eager to see these things done, and yet will we test that? Will we take the steps we need to follow him? Will we let God? Will we let him bless us? Or will we stumble? Like, are we going to be the generation that they look back on and say, thank God for their faithfulness? Like, thank God they did what they were supposed to. Thank God for their obedience. Or are we going to leave this like legacy of electrical tape? Not dealing with the problems, not dealing with what we know could be, and we just miss. We miss what God has for us. Here's what happens. This trickles down into real life, and suddenly your business or your family time or your pocketbook, the opportunities and your goals, those things don't conflict with Jesus. In this mindset, as you walk with him and he renews who you are, you realize that those are the stage where we get to walk with him. Those are the things that he will use to allow us to know him better. Like, that's the context where we get to live out this love of Jesus. It's in those things. And some of us have more elementary understanding where we're like, well, here's Jesus, and then there's everything in the world. And it's not really like that. God's changing us so that we will go change the world. That we will use the opportunities we have to experience his blessing, which means changing the world with him. To experience faith right in front of us. What would it be like to cry out to him? Like, that was your heart. That God, show me your wisdom. God, renew me in your pleasing, perfect will. God, tell me what it's like to be wise in you. God, show me this new way to see myself, to see others. Renew the way I view things. Renew the hope I have. What if that was this convinced person? That you're a person of faith now. I don't know how it ends, but I know the one who does. I can trust, I have this wisdom. I fear him, and I keep his commandments. Why? Because I love Jesus. Like, he's changed me. He's continuing to change me. And in that, I get to experience joy. I get to live a life of purpose. And maybe you can't really imagine living that way. It's a little too up in the sky. I can understand that, but know that it's a reality. And it's the vision for us that is attainable as we walk closely with Jesus. You can pray these things. Like, this can be a reality in your life today. That you can come close to him. You can learn wisdom in faith. You can become a new person. You can be changed. You can become stronger. You can, if you're willing to stop trying to achieve purpose and live in the beautiful purpose that God has already gifted us in Jesus.